This program was made possible in part by a grant from the 3M Company.
I guess because we have adopted more than just one or two kids, I sometimes feel like people expect me to be some kind of super mom and, some kind of super person because I have done this wonderful thing for humanity.
Cecil and Cecilia are available for adoption. They are 4-year-old twins, and they have lived in a stable, loving foster home since birth.
The present law says that all those adoption records are sealed and can only be opened for good cause shown by the judge having probate jurisdiction. I'm not too sure that's not the best of all legislation.
Attitudes about that have changed. It's more acceptable to be a single parent. It's more acceptable to be a teenager and be pregnant.
There's not many ways of life that you can really change a situation for other people. I mean, we can talk about world peace and hunger, but we are making changes in people's lives, and that's neat.
How is the adoption situation here in Indiana different from that of the rest of the nation? How do adopting parents go about selecting their children, and then what kind of children do they actually end up adopting? What kind of people adopt, and why do they do it? Well, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be taking a look at some of these questions by visiting with people who are very active in the local adoption scene. Some of the answers we come up with, I think, will surprise you. Others will impress you. Some will depress you. And others will leave you wondering just exactly how you do feel. I'm John Samples. Adoption seems to have become stereotyped, at least to the point that when most of us think about adoption, we picture a nice scene with a nice young couple taking home their nice, newborn, healthy, usually white infant. Well, this is still happening, and this is still a very important part of the adoption picture. However, those involved in adoption know that this scene, on the most part, has become the exception rather than the rule. Here in Indiana, healthy white infants, and to an increasing degree since 1970, all infants are becoming very difficult to adopt simply because the infants are not available. James Mallon of the Indianapolis Children's Bureau explains at least some of the problem.
Today, many girls feel quite comfortable in being a single parent, and quite honestly, some of them are doing an excellent job in this regard. On the other hand, the number of younger girls that are conceiving and having children is somewhat frightening, since most of them are still keeping those children. 14-year-olds, occasionally a 13-year-old, 15 and 16 is very much average. And the youngsters are being kept by these girls who are totally unable to provide adequately for the child, at least through their own efforts.
From what I hear from them, they run into a lot of problems with peers, and a lot of times peers feel that it's okay to be pregnant, that's acceptable now, but it's not okay to place a baby for adoption. Somewhere along the line they see that, the baby is yours, so therefore you have to, stick it out and keep the baby. So I'd say that's pretty different. Years ago, girls came here, nobody knew they were pregnant, they didn't discuss it, that was a very shameful thing. Attitudes about that have changed. It's more acceptable to be a single parent. It's more acceptable to be a teenager and be pregnant.
A few years ago, I would say approximately 90% of the girls would go to a maternity home and go through the secrecy and the whole bit and place their babies for adoption. Today, on nationwide figures, you're talking about approximately 90% keeping.
Kay is a caseworker for Sue Emma Coleman, one of the agencies hit hardest by the infant shortage. Sue Emma Coleman specializes in healthy, usually white infants.
Because, again, we always have many, many more parents than we can ever give babies to. In fact, agencies will close intake, what we call, intake, because people call in and want to put their name on a waiting list. And consequently, we just have to close it periodically, or the list would be so long we would never get to the end of it. It would be useless. Our waiting period from the time they first meet our eligibility requirements and we can take their name and put it on a list until they get a child is averaging 3 years. A couple of years ago, we were only 18 months.
St. Elizabeth's Home is a residential care facility for girls, generally in their last 3 months of pregnancy, who would like special services in a home-like environment. Counseling about what to do with the child is one of the services, And if the girl decides not to keep the infant, adoption arranging is another. Does this provide St. Elizabeth's with an edge in the competitive infant adoption market? Doris Steicher.
But what happens is that, of course, they get to know the adoption staff also. And sometimes, perhaps, their decision about placing might be more secure because they also have an opportunity to get to know us as people and to know that we are not looking at their baby as a marketable product. And we make ourselves very available to them. We talk to them, we answer their questions very honestly. And I think perhaps that is the advantage, is because we are all here in one facility, that we do have that give and take. Past 12 months, we've made approximately 55 placements, and of those, 8 have been mixed-race children, and we also have placed 3 black children in homes, and of those, we probably have had about 5 that have had medical problems, and we also have placed 2 older children.
The children most agencies are now dealing primarily with are, in fact, those last 3 categories: black children, children with problems, older children, or any combination thereof. The Lutheran Child Welfare Association works with all kinds of children. Like most agencies, they have adopted different parental requirements of the adopting parents, depending upon the type of child adopted. To be eligible for a healthy infant, one must first be a member of the Lutheran Church. This requirement is waived for all other children. Deborah Koharic.
Healthy white infants, this year we've placed 10. Most of the young women coming to us are deciding to keep their babies, and that's, we don't care one way or the other. It's the option is available for them to place if they want that. I don't know if that's the trend all over the city. I believe adoptions of healthy infants are down everywhere. The supply of older children, I don't know how many are listed in the resource book right now. I think there are probably 50 or 60 waiting children in Indiana, and maybe more that are not legally free yet. So as far as there are lots of older kids available if people are interested in children that are over 6, not cute, blonde, blue-eyed babies.
Most of the children that we are placing for adoption have come into the system by being made wards of the department through abandonment, abuse, and/or neglect of the natural parent. And then at a later point of time, the legal ties have been cut with the parent, and then we look to making the permanent placement of the child with an adoptive family.
Robert Johnson is a caseworker with Homes for Black Children here in Indianapolis. This is an adoption agency set up about 18 months ago to reach out specially to the black community to find black families for black children.
Well, basically, what has happened is the older black child is considered a hard-to-place child. And in past, people have not been willing to adopt the older black child. Black families traditionally are they have been adopting, but it's been informally. They adopt, relatives' children, through extended families, and they have not gone through the legal process. So as a result, there are a lot of children who are, left on the outside. Our parent agency, Children's Bureau, felt that there was a need to establish an agency that dealt solely with black children, the older black children who needed to be adopted. So this is how the program came about. And what we are in the process of doing is trying to find parents and for the children that we do have available, and to let them know that in order for the child to be really accepted as a child in the family, it has to be adopted legally. The children that we do have available at this point have been abandoned in some form or fashion. They do not have any extended family or relatives that are interested in them. So these children are, like I said before, are considered hard-to-place children. And what we found is that the older the child gets, the harder it is to place the child in a family, because people at this point are really interested in infants, and not the older adopted child.
Today, the number of children we're placing for adoption, particularly from the white community, is in 1 year 15 to 18 children,
This is all ages?
No, just the infant. The agency is still placing about 50 children a year, but the bulk of them are older youngsters.
If you're interested in seeing what kind of children are available now for adoption, this is the book that you should read. It's called the Indiana Adoption Resource Exchange, and it's available through the adoption agencies to look through and see what kind of children are in fact available. It actually gives the impression of hardness towards the kids through the way that it packages them, if you will. But whatever its drawbacks, it apparently works. Pat Vesper with the State Welfare Department.
The state gets involved in adoption in that we coordinate the Indiana Adoption Resource Exchange, which is a photo listing service. It acts as an information and referral service, trying to find homes for what we call special needs or hard-to-place children. I would say it's highly successful. The exchange is designed, as I said, to help place hard-to-place or special needs children. These are school-age children, minority children, children with significant physical problems, mental problems, emotional problems, handicaps. Children not first thought of when people think about adoption, and children who are more difficult to find homes for. And since we've been in operation, the exchange, since we've listed children, we've placed close to somewhere between 300-400 children have been placed for adoption. There are very few healthy young white children, as opposed to lots of families who want them. But we do have a great need for what we call the special needs child, the school-age child, the minority child, which in Indiana is basically the black child. We have very few, if any, Spanish American, Native American children in our state. We have a need for families who can take children with significant medical problems, emotional problems, handicaps. Nothing minor like a child needing glasses to correct an eye problem, but something of more serious nature. Or families who can take a family of children, 3, 4, 5 enough brothers and sisters that we'd like to place together. That's the kind of the group of children for whom we look for families, as opposed to the younger child that families look for children.
Cecil and Cecilia are available for adoption. They are 4-year-old twins, and they have lived in a stable, loving foster home since birth. Cecilia is very pretty, a most feminine little lady. Quiet and shy, she has outgrown all of her physical problems resulting from a premature birth and is a normal, happy, easygoing 4-year-old. She is now enjoying the stimulation and fun of a regular nursery school, although she did attend Noble School for 1 year. While she is very helpful with her brother, she has a strong sense of self and won't let him push her around as 4-year-old brothers are wont to do. Cecil is loving and physically affectionate. He has cerebral palsy and is developmentally disabled. He has real spirit, though, for with all the handicaps he has come far. Doctors thought that he would not walk, but he does. He also rides a tricycle. He is developing language skills, and while he is sometimes hard to understand, a good listener can tell that he is speaking in full sentences, really communicating. According to the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis, Cecil and Cecilia need adoptive parents who have lots of energy and patience and who can individualize the children. The adoptive parents can have other children in the home, but it might be best if the twins were the youngest in the family. Richard is an easygoing, likable, interested in everything 10-year-old. An excellent student, Richard is often called the little professor. Richard already knows what he wants to be when he grows up, a paleontologist, and he spends his free time reading up on dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals, such as these at the Children's Museum. Although Richard is interested in the prehistoric past, he's very much a part of the present. He likes soccer, is a member of a Little League baseball team, and is now learning to box. Richard has lived in Evan House for 1½ years. That's a group home for young boys under the care of the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis. He probably will never be able to live at home again because of family problems that were no fault of Richard's. Although he has not been released for adoption yet, Richard needs a long-term, loving foster family who will emotionally and intellectually nurture him as their own. Richard is a diabetic. He controls it with insulin shots each day, as well as a calorie-limited diet. However, Richard knows how to take care of himself. He gives himself 2 shots a day, takes several urine tests a day to judge his sugar level, and can tell you if his sugar is so low he might have a diabetic reaction in time that he can correct the condition. In a few moments, we'll tell you how you can get more information about Richard, Cecil and Cecilia, and others. There are many emotional and controversial issues surrounding the subject of adoption. It's partly for this reason that frequently legislation is introduced to the Indiana General Assembly. This year, there is a major effort underway to revise Indiana's adoption laws. In fact, a special committee has been studying the situation for several months now. John Donaldson of Lebanon is the chairman of that committee.
Well, I suppose there have always been people who want to revise any particular law. In this area of more openness, I think we're in that area of openness. There was a study committee request in the last session representing John Thomas from Brazil to create a study committee to study revisions of the present adoption law. And we have been working since about June or July trying to come up with some type of bill for the 1981 session. We are still in an embryo stage in a way and going through trying to get a philosophical idea of how far we're going to open up records and in what areas. I suppose the other major area would be whether we abolish the private agency adoption. Right now, the feeling that I begin to get from the committee is that there is a place for the private agency adoption, but with certain regulations, a stipulation, they are under some type of regulation and regulation on the amount of fees that may be charged, because you have read and we've all heard of these stories where the baby selling markets where they sell kids for fantastic amounts of thing, and also so that the people know what they've got to pay. How much do they pay? Do they pay of the cost of the birth of the child and so forth?
We don't need a great deal of change in our adoption laws. Some states have outlawed private placements, for example. That proposal has been before our legislature many times and been refused. I think if the waiver hearing is done like we do it here, a real screening, that there's no reason that the private placement adoptions should be abolished completely. Matter of fact, if they are, we might have more what I'd call de facto adoption, not even coming to court at all. If a parent goes, gets the child and brings it home, just doesn't come to court and raise the child as their own. That's been found to happen in other states that take place. The other big thing, of course, is the right to know portion of the legislature, a very important concern at the present time. A lot of children or people who have been adopted feel they have a right to have their records, have access to their records. Adoptive parents sometimes think that they have a right to have those private. People who have given up their children later years want to find out what happened to their child. The present law says that all those adoption records are sealed and can only be opened for good cause shown by the judge having probate jurisdiction. I'm not too sure that's not the best of all legislation. How do you write a law to take care of every unique situation that comes up? The rights of the parties are in conflict. The adoptive parents have certain rights, obviously. The adopted child has certain rights. And the biological parents have certain rights. And they write these laws and they say, well, if they get consent, but you got to understand these things are 10, 20, and 30 years after adoption takes place. Who's going to pay for getting to find those people and put all the consents back together? In addition to get a hold of the adoptive parents and say somebody wants this information, that alone is traumatic to those people. And so I'm just saying that it's a very delicate subject, and I don't know how you write perfect legislation on the subject.
If you would like to become involved in the legislative process of revising Indiana's adoption laws, write a letter to that effect, requesting meeting times and other pertinent information, and send it to the Legislative Services Agency, the State House, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46204. At this time, I would like to share with you 2 visits I had recently with 2 area families who are very active in the adoption process. Jim and Edie Keating live on the near northwest side of Indianapolis with their 6 children, 2 of which are biologically theirs. Their only income is from Jim's position as Vice President for Education for the Superior Training Trade School. They completed the adoption of their last child, or latest child, 4 weeks ago tomorrow. They have thought about adopting since they were in college.
I think I thought, before we ever adopted anybody, that there might be a feeling in my mind that, you know, that the adopted kids would be different in some way or another. It just doesn't work that way. You know, very soon, very quickly, I'm saying within a week, they're part of the family. And that's just the way it is. And so I don't think I ever feared that. I probably thought it, but never feared it. And as it turns out, they all just fit in.
They're each unique. You know, as in every family, they're just each very much their own person. Tracy has grown into just a lovely young lady. When we first got her and Christopher, they were just really shells. You know, they would smile with their lips, but their eyes were just totally blank. They had been emotionally deprived and socially and culturally totally without, just totally void. They had never been physically abused, but they were just so emotionally deprived that they were just really shells with zero personality. And Tracy has just totally blossomed. You know, she's, like I said, grown into just a lovely, lovely young lady. She has a couple of problems in school, but she's overcome them so beautifully, I think, which maybe supports the theory that environment and encouragement can sometimes overcome genetic inheritance, you know, as far as intellectual levels are concerned. Christopher, he's mischievous and vivacious, and he's just a wild man. And like I say, when he came to us at age 2, he was just, you know, you could tell him to go lay in the street and he'd just crawl out there submissively and do it. You know, he was just totally...
You never did that, though.
No, he never did that. He was totally submissive, and, you know, now he's just turned into a real character. Jonathan, our 5-year-old, he's, I'll say, quote-unquote, gifted. He does seem to be intellectually advanced. I'll qualify that. He's just a marvelous little kid. He's cute as a button. I'm afraid he knows it. Sharp as a tack. You know, I can't pull anything over on him. You know, he's just real perceptive and just, he's just really, really advanced for his years, which gives us fits. Leah, she's a jewel. We've had her not quite a year now. In fact, we just finalized her yesterday. Of course, she's the baby of the family, and we tend to spoil her. You know, we allow her to do all these wild things that we never let anybody else at age 5 do. And of course, all the kids constantly remind us that we're letting her do these things that they couldn't do at age 5. I guess she's kind of the queen bee, you know. Usually what Leah wants, Leah gets, which frequently happens with the last child.
The two biological kids are Abe, who is 10, and Joe, who's 9. And really, it isn't a subject that's, you might say, formally discussed a lot. I mean, it's just accepted. Other kids are adopted, and they just come and fit into the family just fine. And Abe and Joe, who were the first, you might say, because they were biological kids, they never question it. It's just the way it is, you know. And so we really don't discuss it in that sense at all, you know, like how do you feel about this, or how do you know, what's your opinion on the subject, because really it's just the way it is.
I sometimes feel terribly guilty for reacting like a normal parent. I guess because we have adopted more than just 1 or 2 kids, I sometimes feel like people expect me to be some kind of super mom and, you know, some kind of super person because I have done this wonderful thing for humanity. When in reality, I mean, we don't look at it that way. It's just the way we built our family. We built it differently from everybody else. But I sometimes find myself feeling really guilty when I resent the kids, you know, and I wish they were out of the way, and I want to do things for me, which are very normal parent feelings. I mean, you know, every parent has those feelings, wish they had more time for themselves and wish the kids weren't around once in a while. And so I have trouble with that, and very seldom does anyone ever, you know, ask about that, you know, but I frequently have a real guilt trip for feeling normal. And I guess probably my advice to a parent who was considering adoption would be that you're going to feel like any normal parent. You know, you're not going to feel like some savior of society. You're going to just be a normal parent with normal feelings and normal resentments and normal guilts and normal reactions. So I think that would probably be my advice to anybody out there thinking about adoption.
Westfield, Indiana is the home of Jerry and Pat Barrows. Like the Keatings, the Barrows have 2 biological children. They have adopted 9 others, including Harry, who is mentally impaired. Jerry is a school teacher at Westfield High School. Pat does not work. How can they afford 11 children, and maybe more?
Well, it's always been a consideration, I think, but like right now, we're getting ready to add on to the house to make some more space available, but I think our financial situation is one where our priorities have been different than some families, where some smaller families will spend their money on fancier clothes or going out to eat more often or going to movies all the time. Our priorities have been to maintain a family and a good home environment, and we, besides my teaching income, we do have an additional income besides that, but
Still,
it's not easy. This is Harry. Harry suffers from mental and emotional problems. The Brailles adopted him several years ago in spite of, or perhaps because of, his needs.
We have always been open to various things and have felt that the child for us was there somewhere and would just automatically, through the agency or some way, get to us. And Harry came to us that way. We went to an agency for a picture we saw in the paper, and Harry was presented as a possibility, and it worked out very well. I don't think you mentioned emotional problems or special problems of an older child. I think we treat that no different than a regular family would of a biological child. There are counselors and doctors and various places that can offer help. I think many people are afraid of an older child adoption. By that I mean someone over 2 years old or something like that. Because they feel that the child is already developed into his own personality and is a fixed person. And that's not our experience. The older children we've gotten, as old as 12 years old, can change and develop and fit into any particular pattern you want to make them into.
it's just like a marriage. I mean, where you have two adults that are making changes toward each other. It's the same way with older kids. They're able to make these changes. There's not many ways of life that you can really change a situation for other people. I mean, we can talk about world peace and hunger, but we are making changes in people's lives, and that's neat. And it's not given to just everybody to have that kind of opportunity to make substantial changes in other people's lives, and I think that's really what we're doing, and we enjoy it.
For more information on adoption in Indiana, contact the State Department of Public Welfare, the Child Support Division, 141 South Meridian Street in Indianapolis, Indiana, 46225, or the local chapter of the Council on Adoptable Children, in care of 16101 Little Creek Avenue, Westfield, Indiana, 46074. Or look in the phone book for the number of any of the 6 adoption agencies in Marion County: the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis, Homes for Black Children, the Lutheran Child Welfare Association, the Suema-Coleman Agency, St. Elizabeth's Home, or the Marion County Department of Welfare. Outside of Marion County, call your county welfare department or look in the phone book under adoption. For the past 30 minutes, we have been looking at the local adoption situation here in central Indiana, and we have barely scratched the surface. There are many more issues, some considerably more visual than those we have covered here. Perhaps we can cover some of those on future such programs, but for now, our time is all gone. We would like to think that some light has been shed on something of a mysterious subject, adoption, and we would also like to think that in some small way, a positive situation might result between a waiting child somewhere and a waiting family. I'm John Samples. Thank you for watching, and happy Thanksgiving. Adoption in Indiana has been a videotaped production of WFYI-TV Channel 20.